And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country. It's one of the most famous lines a president has ever spoken. We've all heard it. It's been quoted, memed, and basically etched into our collective memory. But the real power of John F. Kennedy's 1961 inaugural address wasn't just in that one perfect sentence. The secret sauce was hidden in the speech's very structure, a formula engineered to tackle the terrifying reality of the Cold War. This speech had to do more than just introduce a new president. It had to calm a nervous world, unite a divided country, and inspire a whole new generation to pick up a torch. So today, we're breaking down the rhetorical weapons Kennedy used to turn a brief, 14-minute speech into a timeless call to action that still echoes today. To really get the genius of this speech, you have to understand the fear. It's 1961, and the world is holding its breath. And that's not a metaphor. For millions of people, it was a daily reality. School kids were practicing duck and cover drills under their desks in case of a nuclear attack. Families were seriously talking about building bomb shelters in their backyards. The United States and the Soviet Union stood like two giants, locked in a long twilight struggle, a Cold War that felt like it could turn catastrophically hot at any second. This wasn't some abstract political tension. It felt personal. The invention of the hydrogen bomb meant humanity now held, in Kennedy's own words, the power to abolish all forms of human poverty and all forms of human life. The space race was on, but for every exciting satellite launch, there was the terrifying reality of the arms race, the constant nagging question of who had more missiles pointed at whom. Just a year earlier, a U.S. spy plane was shot down over the Soviet Union, cranking the tension up to a fever pitch. This was the world John F. Kennedy inherited, a world living in the shadow of a mushroom cloud. The audience for this speech wasn't just the crowd on the Capitol lawn, it was the entire planet. Kennedy's task was huge. He'd just won one of the tightest elections in American history, barely beating Richard Nixon. The country was split. He was young, the first president born in the 20th century, and he was Catholic, which for some was still a cause for suspicion. He had to stamp his authority on the office and unite the nation, all while staring down the single greatest threat humanity had ever cooked up for itself. So, the speech couldn't just be a laundry list of domestic policies. In fact, it barely mentions them. Kennedy and his advisors knew the one thing that could bring a divided America together was a shared purpose on the world stage. The speech had to be a declaration to everyone, a message to allies that America had their back, a message to new and developing nations that America supported their freedom, and, most importantly, a message to the Soviet Union, an adversary he never actually names but is clearly talking to, that America was willing to be both strong and reasonable. It was a tightrope walk. He had to sound strong without being a warmonger. He had to offer peace without looking weak. He had to inspire hope in an age of deep, deep anxiety. Every single word had to be chosen with surgical precision. The stakes weren't just about his presidency's success, but about the world's survival. This speech wasn't just a ceremony, it was a strategic move on the global chessboard, delivered on a bitterly cold and snowy January day that just added to the drama. Before we get into the words, we have to talk about the man who said them and the man who helped him write them. John F. Kennedy was a brand. He was young, handsome, a decorated war hero. He and his team carefully built this image of youthful energy, the dawn of a new era. This was his credibility, his ethos. He wasn't just another politician, he was the living symbol of a new generation of Americans. When he spoke of a torch being passed, he was talking about himself. And with television becoming a household fixture, more Americans could see him and feel like he was speaking directly to them, making his message feel incredibly personal and urgent. But Kennedy didn't do it alone. His main partner in crime was Ted Sorensen, his special counsel and advisor, a man Kennedy famously called his intellectual blood bank. Sorensen was way more than a speechwriter. He and Kennedy developed a style so unified it was hard to tell where one began and the other ended. For the inaugural, Kennedy gave Sorensen a mission: study Lincoln's Gettysburg Address, figure out its magic, and apply it here. Sorensen realized Lincoln's power came from using simple words and short, powerful sentences to talk about huge ideas. While Sorensen was the main architect, drafting the speech on his signature yellow legal pads, lots of people had input, from clergy to the economist John Kenneth Galbraith and the politician Adlai Stevenson. But Kennedy was the final editor. He knew what he wanted to say and how he wanted it to sound. The final product was a pure distillation of his philosophy. So who wrote which exact line? It doesn't matter as much as the fact that the themes and principles were pure Kennedy. This mix, a charismatic leader, a brilliant wordsmith, and a clear, urgent vision, created the perfect storm for a historic speech. All right, let's pop the hood and look at the engine of this speech. What actually makes it work? It's a masterclass in classical rhetoric using ancient tricks to solve a very modern problem. We're going to break it down into 5 key moves. One of the most memorable things about the speech is its rhythm, the way it constantly pits opposing ideas against each other. This is a classic device called antithesis. Take this line: "Man holds in his mortal hands the power to abolish all forms of human poverty and all forms of human life." Poverty and life, creation and destruction, right there in the same hands. This creates instant drama and sky-high stakes. It signals that the world is at a tipping point. But they take it a step further with a fancier, more elegant version called chiasmus, which flips the structure in the second half. The most famous example, besides the last line, is this gem: "Let us never negotiate out of fear, but let us never fear to negotiate." Think about how brilliant that is. It's a signature Kennedy move. The first part, "never negotiate out of fear," sends a clear message of strength to the Soviets. We won't be bullied. But the second half, "never fear to negotiate," immediately offers an olive branch. It says we're confident enough and strong enough that we aren't afraid to talk. It's tough and conciliatory in the same breath. It's memorable, pleasing to the ear, and lets him project 2 essential messages at once. We are powerful and we are peaceful. A speech can't just be clever wordplay, it has to paint a picture. Kennedy does this with powerful imagery, and the best example is, of course, the torch. Let the word go forth from this time and place, to friend and foe alike, that the torch has been passed to a new generation of Americans. This is so much more than a nice phrase. The torch is a killer symbol. It makes you think of the Olympics, a peaceful passing of responsibility. It suggests continuity with the past, but also forward motion. It defines his presidency as a historic turning point. The old guard is out, youth and energy are in. It also honors the previous generation, the one tempered by war, disciplined by a hard and bitter peace, while announcing his own generation is ready to take over. This wasn't just pretty language. It was a strategic move to frame his entire administration as a fresh start. If you listen to the speech, you can feel it building momentum, like a rising tide. A lot of that comes from 2 related devices: anaphora and parallelism. Anaphora is just repeating a word or phrase at the beginning of successive sentences. It creates a powerful, almost hypnotic rhythm. Just listen to the section where he addresses the world. It's a masterclass. To those old allies, to those new states, to those people in the huts and villages, to our sister republics south of our border, finally, to those nations who would make themselves our adversary. That repetition works like a drumbeat. It's structured, organized, and all-encompassing. By addressing each group one by one, he makes every part of the world feel included in his vision. He then combines this with parallelism, using similar sentence structures. Look at his call for cooperation. Let both sides explore. Let both sides, for the first time, formulate. Let both sides seek to invoke. The repeated, let both sides makes the call for peace feel like a logical step-by-step plan. The rhythm does the arguing for him. It builds this sense of undeniable momentum toward a better future. As the speech moves forward, there's a subtle but critical shift. Kennedy stops just describing the world and starts commanding the audience. He begins using the imperative voice, giving orders. This is the true call to action. He says, "Now the trumpet summons us again." A trumpet is a classic symbol for a call to arms, but he quickly clarifies it's not a call to battle, but a call to bear the burden of a long twilight struggle. He's telling the American people they have a job to do. This is not a spectator sport. He masterfully uses inclusive language to make this feel personal. He doesn't just say Americans, he says, "my fellow Americans." He doesn't just say people of the world, he says my fellow citizens of the world. This language closes the distance between the president and the public. Phrases like, "in your hands" and "let us" create a feeling of shared responsibility. He isn't a king giving orders from on high. He's a fellow citizen, rolling up his sleeves with everyone else. This is a crucial psychological move. He transforms his audience from passive listeners into active participants. And that brings us to the final immortal line, the one everyone knows. It's the peak of the speech, combining every technique we've talked about. It is the most perfect example of chiasmus, or anti-metabole, in modern oratory. And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. Let's break down its genius. First, the structure. It's that perfect, symmetrical, flipped structure that's so rhythmic it's almost impossible to forget. Your brain just locks it in. Second, the psychology. The first half, ask not what your country can do for you, is a direct challenge to entitlement. It calls out the passive citizen who just waits for the government to solve their problems. Then, with a simple flip, ask what you can do for your country completely redefines the relationship between a person and their nation. It recasts patriotism not as a feeling, but as an action. Not as passive love, but as active service. It is a direct and powerful appeal to duty, sacrifice, and civic responsibility. This one sentence perfectly captures the speech's core idea that the great challenges of the day, tyranny, poverty, disease, war, couldn't be solved by the government alone. They required the energy and commitment of every single citizen. It was the perfect ending. And then he immediately took it global. My fellow citizens of the world, ask not what America will do for you, but what together we can do for the freedom of man. He made everyone, everywhere, a partner in the project. The speech was over in under 15 minutes, but its impact was immediate and it has lasted for decades. For a country still wounded from a bitter election, Kennedy's focus on shared values was a powerful unifying force. It set an optimistic, aspirational tone for his entire presidency. And it wasn't just words, it led directly to action. The best example is the Peace Corps, created just a few weeks later, which was the living embodiment of the ask what you can do idea. Thousands of young Americans signed up, volunteering to serve in developing nations, directly fighting the poverty and disease Kennedy had talked about. Around the world, the speech was a hit. It reassured allies that America was a reliable partner. It offered emerging nations an alternative to Soviet communism, one based on freedom and partnership. And it sent a clear message to the Soviets. We have conviction, but we are also ready to talk. It redefined America's role on the world stage, not as an isolationist nation, but as an engaged global leader fighting for liberty. Decades later, the speech is still the gold standard of American oratory. It's studied in schools not just for its history, but as a perfect piece of rhetorical craftsmanship. The ask not line is so baked into our culture that it's instantly recognizable even to people who've never heard the full speech. It's become shorthand for a more idealistic vision of public service. The enduring power of the speech is that perfect fusion of the moment and the method. The historical context, the terrifying stakes of the Cold War gave his words incredible weight. But it was his masterful use of rhetoric, the elegant contrasts, the vivid imagery, the driving rhythm, and that powerful call to action that turned urgency into inspiration. He gave a generation afraid of annihilation a new noble purpose, to take on that long twilight struggle and secure the freedom of humanity. Ultimately, what made Kennedy's asknot speech so powerful was its bone-deep optimism. At a moment when the world had every reason to despair, when humanity had finally invented the tools for its own extinction, JFK stood up and offered hope instead of fear. He offered unity instead of division. And most importantly, he offered a challenge instead of easy comfort. He challenged his fellow citizens to be bigger than their fears, to become active players in history, and to believe their individual actions could, together, light up the world. The speech lasts because that challenge never gets old. The specific enemies might change, but the fundamental struggle against tyranny, poverty, and war remains. And the central question Kennedy asked, "What can you do?" is one that every generation has to answer for itself. What do you think about the speech? Does its message of civic duty still resonate today? Let us know in the comments. And if you found this breakdown useful, be sure to like this video and subscribe for more deep dives into history's most powerful moments. Thanks for watching.